They thought it would be a quiet escape, a weekend drive, no crowds, no phones, just the open road. But one wrong turn led them into a jungle where the trees blotted out the sun and the silence pressed like a weight. When their car died miles from anywhere, James and Sophia set out on foot, unaware they were stepping into a labyrinth of predators, hunger, and unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Each night brought new terrors. Each day stripped away more hope. And when the jungle finally broke its silence, it wasn't to let them go. It was to decide if they would leave alive. The weekend had promised quiet roads and golden sunshine. James gripped the steering wheel with a relaxed smile, the silver sedan humming smoothly along the winding countryside route. Beside him, Sophia rested her head against the seat, hair catching the shifting beams of light filtering through towering roadside trees. The paved road curved like a ribbon, leading them away from cities, away from noise. As the day wore on, the air grew heavier, warmer, carrying a scent of damp earth and moss. The road narrowed until asphalt gave way to packed dirt, hemmed in by dense jungle walls. Sunlight barely pierced the canopy now. The world beyond the windshield was a tunnel of deep greens and shadow. "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, but her voice carried a note of unease. Ancient trees loomed like silent guardians, their roots knotted and gnarled. The car's tires crunched over fallen leaves, and with every bend the jungle seemed to close in tighter. James glanced at the fuel gauge, still fine, but an odd heaviness sat in his chest. Just as they rounded a sharp curve, the sedan coughed, shuddered, and went still. He turned the key again. Click, click, silence. A strange stillness fell over the jungle, so complete it made their ears ring. They reached for their phones. No bars, no map, no way forward. James sighed, forcing calm. "We'll set up camp for tonight. Figure it out in the morning." They slung on their small backpacks, leaving supplies in the locked car, unaware this would be the last time they'd see it for days. James led the way, the straps of his backpack digging into his shoulders as they moved deeper into the foliage. The dirt path faded quickly, replaced by a carpet of thick, damp leaves. Every step sank slightly, releasing the earthy scent of decay. Sophia glanced over her shoulder more than once, half expecting to see the silver sedan still visible through the trees, but it had vanished completely. The air was still, heavy enough to make breathing feel like work. Insects buzzed lazily, darting away when disturbed. After an hour, they stumbled upon a small clearing, a rare pocket where sunlight managed to touch the ground. "Here's as good as anywhere," James said, dropping his pack. Sophia crouched, brushing leaves aside to clear a small circle for a fire. As the sun dipped, shadows stretched long and black, crawling toward them like fingers. James gathered twigs and branches, his mind already on finding something edible before darkness swallowed the forest. "Don't go far," Sophia warned, her voice low. He waved her off, disappearing beyond the clearing. She struck flint against steel, coaxing a fragile flame into life. The smell of burning wood was oddly comforting. Then a sound. Not the rustle of leaves in the wind, but something heavier, deliberate. Sophia froze, scanning the treeline. Before she could call out, a scream shattered the quiet, James's voice, raw with terror. Her body moved before thought caught up. She snatched the thickest branch she could find and ran toward the sound, the firelight flickering behind her. The scream pulled Sophia through the undergrowth like a wire hooked to her chest. Branches tore at her arms. Roots snagged her boots, but she didn't slow. Then she saw it, a blur of muscle and striped fury. The tiger had James pinned, its weight crushing the breath from his chest. Its claws had ripped through his jacket, blood blooming dark against the fabric. The animal's massive head jerked, jaws clamped on his shoulder. Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs. She gripped the branch tighter, every muscle screaming with fear and adrenaline. The tiger growled, a sound so deep it vibrated in her bones. She raised the branch high and swung. Once, the wood cracking hard against its skull. The beast recoiled but didn't release him. She hit again, harder this time, her arms jolting from the impact. On the third blow, the tiger let out a guttural snarl, staggering back before collapsing into the leaves with a heavy thud. The silence afterward felt almost unreal. Sophia dropped to her knees beside James. His face was pale, slick with sweat, his breath shallow. Blood poured freely from the gashes. She pressed large, broad leaves against the wounds, tearing strips from her shirt to bind them in place. "Stay with me," she whispered, forcing her voice to stay steady. By the time she dragged him back to the camp, night had fallen. She sat beside him, gripping the blood-stained branch, eyes fixed on the tree-line. Every crack, every distant rustle made her tighten her grip. Sleep never came. The jungle was not quiet that night. It was alive with whispers, rustling leaves, distant cries, the low, strange hum of unseen insects. The fire Sophia had built earlier had burned down to embers, casting faint, shifting light that barely reached the edges of the clearing. James lay on the ground, fever already starting to warm his skin. She kept adjusting the makeshift bandages, pressing the leaves tighter each time fresh blood seeped through. Somewhere out there, past the black curtain of trees, something moved. She could hear it. Slow steps crunching over damp leaves, pausing, then starting again. Her eyes kept darting toward the sound, but she saw nothing beyond a shifting wall of shadows. Sophia wrapped her arms around her knees, keeping the branch close, the dried blood along its surface sticky in her grip. Each time the firelight flickered lower, she tossed another twig in, desperate to keep the darkness at bay. James stirred once, muttering words she couldn't understand. His fevered mind wandered, but his hand reached for hers instinctively. She held it, squeezing back, trying to anchor him. Hours crawled by. The jungle seemed to breathe around them, in slow, heavy waves. Once, she thought she saw eyes, two faint points of yellow light, blinking from the tree-line. When she blinked, they were gone. By the time the first pale light of dawn broke through the canopy, her whole body ached from sitting rigid all night. But she hadn't let go of the branch, not once. The morning came damp and gray, with the air thick enough to feel like it clung to their skin. James could barely sit up, his breathing shallow, the fever shimmering in his eyes. Sophia knew they couldn't survive long without food, but the jungle seemed endless, an unmarked labyrinth swallowing every path. She decided to try retracing their steps to the car, following vague impressions in the earth and broken twigs. But after an hour of weaving through the trees, she realized she was walking in circles. The jungle had no mercy for the lost. Her stomach gnawed at her from the inside. She spotted clusters of berries clinging to a low bush, small, dark red, and suspiciously shiny. Kneeling, she plucked a single berry, rolling it between her fingers. If they were poisonous, they'd be worse off than before. She took a tiny bite, waited. Nothing, at least not right away. She chewed the rest slowly, the tart taste making her mouth water. When she returned to the camp, James was slumped against the base of a tree. She crushed a few berries in her palm, letting the juice drip into his mouth. His eyes fluttered open briefly, then closed again. By evening, clouds gathered, thick and bruised. The first raindrops fell heavy and cold, soaking their clothes in seconds. The fire sputtered, hissed, and died. They huddled beneath a crude shelter Sophia built from branches and leaves, shivering as the rain drummed endlessly above. The night felt colder than the one before. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the air was still thick and humid, as if the jungle itself was sweating. James's lips were cracked, his skin pale under a sheen of fever. Sophia's own mouth felt dry enough to hurt, each swallow scraping her throat like sandpaper. Hunger they could bear for a while, but thirst was a faster enemy. She closed her eyes and listened. Somewhere beyond the layers of leaves and roots, a faint, rhythmic sound whispered. A trickle, maybe? She followed it, picking her way over fallen logs and tangled vines until she found a narrow stream winding between moss-covered rocks. The water looked clear, but she knew it could still be dangerous. She filled a hollowed piece of bark, carried it back, and set it over the rekindled fire to boil. The steam rose in delicate spirals, carrying the faint mineral scent of wet stone. She let James drink first, tipping the makeshift cup gently to his lips. While scouting further along the stream, she noticed tracks pressed deep into the mud, broad, cloven prints. Wild boar, she guessed, remembering their sharp tusks and unpredictable charge. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. She was already too weak to risk confrontation. Back at the camp, James managed a faint smile after his first real drink in days. It was small, but it was enough to keep her moving. Still, she could feel the jungle watching, silent, patient, waiting for their strength to run out. The jungle came alive in ways Sophia wished it hadn't. By morning, both she and James were covered in angry red welts. Mosquitoes swarmed without mercy, whining in their ears, biting through clothes. Ants marched in relentless lines, crawling over their legs, finding their way into the shelter during the night. Every itch was another reminder that the forest never truly slept. James's fever had worsened, his body trembling with chills even in the sweltering heat. Sophia boiled more water, wiping his face with a damp cloth made from her torn shirt. She kept whispering that he'd be okay, though her voice cracked each time she said it. That night, the fire burned low. Sophia sat close, cradling the branch that had saved James, now almost polished from the constant grip of her hands. The shadows danced in strange shapes across the clearing. That's when James jolted awake, his voice ragged and terrified. "It's here. It's watching us," he rasped, eyes darting toward the trees. She turned and froze. Just beyond the fire's glow, two small points of light hovered in the darkness. Eyes. They blinked once, the faint reflection of firelight glinting off them, before vanishing into the black. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't tell James she'd seen them too. Some truths were heavier than silence. Instead, she kept the fire fed until dawn, her gaze fixed on the tree-line, waiting for whatever was out there to show itself again. The jungle felt heavier, as though its very air was pressing down on them. Sophia's movements had slowed. Each step seemed to drain her further. Her ribs ached from hunger, and James was barely conscious, his breath shallow and uneven. The wounds on his shoulder were swollen, the edges red and angry despite her careful cleaning. The berries were gone. She spent the morning fashioning crude traps from vines and sharpened sticks, loops set along animal trails, pits covered with leaves, but caught nothing. The forest was teeming with life, yet it gave them nothing. It was as if the jungle itself had decided they weren't welcome. James stirred once, his cracked lips moving soundlessly. She knelt beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own voice lacked conviction. She boiled more water, cleaning the wounds again, the steam rising between them like fragile ghosts. In the late afternoon, a soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it a distant sound, so faint she thought she imagined it. A rhythmic thump? No, her mind decided just a branch falling. Still, the sound lingered in her thoughts as night fell. That evening, the fire felt smaller, its glow dimmer. She sat in silence, holding James's hand and staring into the dark. Somewhere deep inside, a part of her had started preparing for the possibility that they wouldn't make it out. But another part refused to let go, not yet. The morning passed in a blur of fatigue. Sophia was half asleep, head resting on her knees, when the jungle changed. It wasn't a sound she heard first. It was the absence of one. No birds, no insects. Even the leaves seemed to hold their breath. Then, faint at first, came a low, steady rumble. Not thunder. The rhythm was mechanical, pulsing through the air like the heartbeat of something massive. She lifted her head, straining to listen. Rotor blades. Her chest tightened. She scrambled to her feet, almost tripping over James as she scanned the sky through the canopy. The sound grew louder, closer, vibrating in her bones. Without thinking, she dropped the branch and bolted toward the noise, weaving between trees, leaping over roots. Branches clawed at her skin, but she didn't slow. The trees broke suddenly into a small clearing, sunlight spilling in like liquid gold. Overhead, a helicopter hovered, its downdraft flattening the grass. Sophia waved frantically, shouting until her voice cracked. The machine dipped lower, and a rope ladder snaked down, swaying in the wind. Two figures in bright rescue gear descended, their movements quick and sure. "We've got you," one called, his voice sharp over the roar of the blades. Within moments, they were at her side, asking about injuries, about others. "James," she gasped. "He's hurt badly." One rescuer signaled, and the other bolted toward the treeline with her leading the way. Relief and fear collided in her chest. They were so close, but they weren't out yet. They reached the clearing to find James still conscious, though barely. His skin was pale beneath the fever's flush, and his breathing came in shallow, uneven pulls. The rescuer knelt beside him, assessing the wounds with quick, practiced hands before securing a harness around his torso. "He goes first," the man shouted over the roar of the helicopter above. Sophia stepped back as the rope lifted James into the air, his limp form swaying slightly. She didn't breathe until he disappeared into the belly of the aircraft. The second rescuer motioned for her to climb into a harness of her own. Her hands shook as she gripped the rope, the ground falling away beneath her. From above, the jungle looked endless, an ocean of green stretching in every direction, its secrets hidden under layers of shadow and silence. The clearing where they had fought, slept, and starved was just a small wound in the vast canopy. Inside the helicopter, James lay wrapped in blankets, an oxygen mask over his face. One of the medics handed Sophia a bottle of water. She drank deeply, the taste sharp and almost overwhelming after days of deprivation. She looked out the open side door one last time. The jungle was already slipping away beneath the clouds, as if swallowing the memory of them whole. They had entered it as travelers, light-hearted and unprepared. They were leaving it as survivors, scarred, changed, and forever aware of how close they had come to disappearing into its silence forever.